God change the wicked?
Can he?
What do you mean by wicked?
If he wanted to.
Can God change the wicked? I mean, I don't want to give an example of the wicked because that might get too political, but just,
What do you mean by God? What do you mean by wicked?
Look, leave Hillary Clinton out of this, Rabbi.
Can he offer an opportunity to change, or can he just do a miracle and make them change?
Can God change them?
He could, but he doesn't believe in it. There's no satisfaction in his forcing them. He wants them to come to him of their own free will.
What were you saying, Michael?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, never mind.
No, that was me. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Nick.
Go ahead.
You know, it was so sarcastic. It's probably good it didn't go out right. And I don't really remember because I've been drinking. I'm sorry. Okay, so can God change the wicked? Sure. I mean, why not? If he can make the sun, moon, and the stars, you got it, baby.
Excuse me.
That's a reasonable approach to the question, right? I mean, Ann, not that yours isn't reasonable, but it does make a lot of assumptions. The only assumption Nick is making is God created the sun, moon, and the stars. God could do that. Why can't God change the wicked?
I said, yeah, he can.
But choose not to?
Yeah. Obviously.
Make exceptions?
So when you mean wicked, what exactly do you mean? I'm sorry to ask you this.
Wicked. I mean, come on. Haven't you ever known anybody who was wicked?
The bad guy.
So I looked up that word once, and it was like twisting truth and falseness kind of together like a candle wick. It was kind of an interesting description. So,
yeah, Steve, what were you going to say?
You said the bad guys. Just
the bad guys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Stephen, you're a lawyer, right? So if I say something,
no, he's not.
Okay.
I'm a psychiatrist.
Oh, then I'm certainly not going to say what I was about to say. Someone would come to my house and be like, "Hello, Nick. Hi, can you come with us for a few minutes?" Be like, "No." Not twice, but anyway, I think it is possible because I can tell you if I've had some monumental changes in my life. I don't know if I was wicked, but I was doing some stuff that was completely inappropriate, which I'll not tell you about. And I'm not joking. I mean, it was pretty bad. Okay. So I don't know if I was truly wicked, but I definitely was misbehaving.
Uh-huh.
So you decided to do different.
Or
God forced you.
I don't know if it was a forcing.
What did you say, Daniel?
I said he decided to have another drink.
Decided to have another drink.
Not that often. No, it was a decision, but it was it came from a moral conviction, the decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I felt like this blinder was removed from my eyes. It was kind of interesting experience.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I don't know if I was ever wicked, but I probably was in that same space too, here and there. Yes, Stephen.
Well, I would say we have to be careful about the terms. Can God work a miracle and change, the wicked to good? I would say that God prefers to show the path, but you have to choose that. Okay, mm-hmm. So that God creates a path that if the wicked choose to follow the Torah, but that God isn't going to work a miracle. I mean, look, Hitler existed. God didn't change him, okay? So God offers the path for the wicked to change, but God doesn't create miracles that make them change.
I think life experience in general supports that answer. That if God really were going to forcibly change the wicked, God hasn't been working enough hours.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on this? Anybody?
What about freedom of choice?
Yeah.
I was going to mention my new friend, Rabbi Lehner. Lehner?
Mordechai Yosef Leiner?
Right. And please correct me if I don't have this exactly right. But part of his way of thinking is that sinners actually have a role in history that God created. In other words, he's kind of against free will. Am I saying this correctly, Rabbi Horwitz?
Yes, you are.
I
By the way,
fascinating.
just to fill everybody else in, Mordechai Yosef Leiner was a Hasidic Rebbe, broke off after being one of the students of the Kutzker Rebbe, mid-19th century, and almost no one in the Jewish world knew about him outside of his own group until in the 20th century, Shlomo Carlebach began to popularize his teachings. And yeah, his view on free will is very iffy. It's very radical.
Well, it's almost the converse side of what you're saying. You're asking, can God change the wicked? And he's saying God created the wicked to be wicked.
Right.
I mean, he wants them to be there to fill some kind of role.
Yeah. I think
it's an interesting
that a theology that radical, had a place until the Holocaust. And it doesn't play as well now as it might have in his own time. And maybe his own time didn't have as much evil as, many people experienced in Eastern Europe, even in the 19th century. But the worst was not in the middle of the 19th century when he was around. Yeah. So
I don't have anything more to say about that. It occurred to me that in Judaism, your question and the rabbis, the other Rabbi Lehner's question, are almost like opposite sides. I mean,
yeah.
And it can exist.
Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Leiner has a lot of interesting things in his teachings. Theology that radical, I'm not sure there are going to be that many takers today.
Did he say exactly why, Rabbi?
Carlebach managed it, I don't know. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So it happens all the time.
Did he give a real, raise your hand, Nick. It's been since I was in second grade. You too, Daniel. Did he give a reason for this? I mean, did he just say that in general, or did he say specifically, I believe this because of this?
I don't know. I think he just felt it was a rational answer to a lot of the sins that he saw, which were just a part of natural life and a part of many stories in the Torah. Maybe we should talk about that next week, because he has a very interesting teaching relating to Pinchas, right? Which actually it's in this week's double Cedar in Parsha Balak at the very end, where Pinchas kills Zimri and Cosby, who are engaging in some kind of unnatural act, or a natural act, but in an unnatural place. And he makes the claim that there's, that maybe it's a sin, but God wanted it to happen for a reason. maybe we'll talk about that next week. Because after all, I mean, the real question is, after spearing these two people, why is Pinchas regarded as, possessing a brit shalom? Why does God give him a covenant of peace? Of all things, could give him a covenant of war if you wanted. That would seem more logical. Anyway, but that would be for next week. Yes, Ann.
Their sin was causing a plague, and he ended the plague by what he did.
Yeah, well, that's one interpretation. That is definitely well. We'll save that for next time. So let me show you what. Well, actually, I have to pull it up on my screen before I can show you. Okay. It's coming eventually. Coming a little too slowly for my liking.
No, that must be a huge photograph.
Okay, here we go. All right, so here's
Ashley's still on if she can help.
no, this is all my problem. So, except my screen is just frozen up, which is not helpful.
Are you just showing? There you go.
Yeah, I'm look now. Okay, so here's the text, and the verse that I want you to look at here is 24:2. As Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped, tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. So the question the rabbis say is, huh? What does that mean? All of a sudden, Balaam looks up. Balaam, who's this, pagan wonder worker. What does it mean the Spirit of God came upon him? Did God, want to make him good? Did God, just throw away all of his sins? I mean, what does this mean? The Spirit of God came upon him. And so we have various opinions about what that means. And the text from the Talmud right here is, just it's just the classic contradiction. How did God speak through Balaam? Rabbi Eliezer said, like an angel. What do you think means, God spoke through him like an angel? What does that mean?
I have no idea.
Yeah, what does it mean?
So I think what it means is that God made Balaam like an angel. Because after all, why would God take someone who was wicked and use that wicked person as his own voice?
Maybe to prove a point.
Maybe.
But he sought to.
I'm not saying that this is the only answer, because right here in the text, you'll see that it's not. But Rabbi Eliezer seems to say that that's what God did. God made him like an angel and then spoke through him. Rabbi Yochanan says no. He spoke through him like a fish hook. That's an interesting image there. In other words, Balaam did not want to bless the Israelites. God made him do it. God stuck him like a fish hook and said, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to say it. Or, you're going to use whatever words you come up with, even though you don't want to. So there you have it. That's the classic contradiction here. How does God speak through Balaam? One opinion, God makes Balaam different. He changes the wicked. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan says, nope. He's still wicked, but God forces him to say something that he doesn't want to say anyway.
But if the context, he asked God, can I go with these guys? And he said, yes, as long as you say what I tell you to. So he basically agreed to let God speak through him.
But
that's true, except Balaam keeps coming back and wanting to say something else. And now what happens is it says the Spirit of God comes upon him. So, maybe you're right, Ann, but I'm not sure. Yes, Stephen.
Well, whether it's a fishhook or an angel, does Balaam fundamentally change, or is it just God speaking through him?
Well, that is the question.
See, there are two issues.
He doesn't change. He just agreed to let God do that.
Well, agreed, or maybe he didn't agree. God just did it. But
one gets the feeling that he did not agree to it.
Yeah, was there really any fundamental psychological change in Balaam? That's the key, I would say.
He's still wicked. He turns around and spends the Midianite or Moabite women to seduce the.
You're getting ahead of yourself, Ann.
That's
okay?
More context. He's still wicked.
I understand, but let's stay with this story and this encounter. Oh, and the other thing that I think supports you, Stephen, in this is the whole story of the talking jackass. By the way, people say that's a miracle. I don't think so. I think it happens all the time. But
come on.
But nonetheless, still, it's clear from that part of the story that Balaam definitely did not want to go bless the Israelites. He didn't want to pass up that payday that he was being offered to curse them. So Barbara notes in the chat, right? And, using someone who is wicked would look silly when words of praise come out. So Balaam was trapped and changed, right? And that apparently is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. God made him like an angel, or at least changed him enough so that he wouldn't look wicked. You can't have a wicked person doing God's work. So God changes him. That seems to be the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. All right. Now, let's go to this next piece in the Midrash. And here it says, when God first met Balaam, he said to him, what are you doing? Balaam said, I have set up for you 7 altars. Okay, now, in context, Balaam doesn't set up 7 altars, to the God of Israel. Right? That's not really what God wants. This can be compared to a money changer who falsified his weights. When the inspector came and caught him, he said, I've already sent a gift to your house. Likewise did Balaam act. Right? In other words, Balaam he's doing what he wants to do until he is forced to do something else. And maybe he's not even like an angel in this case. Maybe God is not changing him, but God is forcing him.
Yeah.
Thoughts, questions?
I'm reminded of hardening of Pharaoh's heart.
Uh-huh. I was wondering when somebody was going to bring that up. Thank you, Joe. There, it's a little different because God doesn't change Pharaoh. He keeps Pharaoh from changing.
Pharaoh did the same thing a whole bunch of times, and he reached the point of no return.
Yes. Yeah. That is one way of reading exactly what Parshat Bo is telling us about, and Parshat Va'era telling us about the acts of Pharaoh. Right? All right, let's go back. Rashbam, the spirit of the divine presence, rested upon Balaam lovingly because of God's love and affection for him.
Oh,
Why
wow.
did God have love and affection for him? Why? Because he really meant to bless the Israelites. Deep down, that was what Balaam wanted to do, even though he was being offered a big payday to do the opposite. Therefore, God, the Spirit of God comes upon him lovingly. Right? That's the opinion of Rashbam. Right?
Oh.
Comments? Yeah.
God gave him, Balaam gave God permission to speak through it, but he didn't become righteous. He never was righteous. Look what he did later. Never mind.
Well, we'll talk about it later. But Rashbam seems to say that, right here, Balaam wants to do the right thing.
Okay, why does the Rashbam say that, though? Is there a
Why
reason?
did the Rashbam say that? Because he's convinced that God would not change him. And also that God would not speak through a wicked person. Therefore, Balaam isn't wicked.
Well, whether someone's wicked or not, they still have the spirit of life in them, right? So in a sense, although they may be wicked, that what keeps them alive is divine. So I think there's a way to get past that, maybe.
That's a very nice and mystical way of getting around the problem. Okay?
That's how I do my
Rashbam,
taxes.
however, Rashbam is not that much of a mystic. Rashbam, by the way, happens to be Rashi's grandson, for those of you not aware of that. But, Rashbam generally gave what he considered to be a pshat, a very straightforward interpretation of the text, and not a mystical interpretation. He says that, at this moment, regardless of what's happened before or whatever is going to happen later on, and no to that, yeah?
I hear you.
So at this moment, Balaam is righteous. And therefore, or maybe, thanks to a little nudge between the donkey and God, Balaam has changed. And so God loves him, and God's spirit is placed upon him. That's Rashbam. Okay? But of course, Rashbam is not unanimously accepted. Just the opposite. In Yosef Bechor Shor, Rashbam's own student, the Spirit of God came upon him means against his will, to force him to bless them. So there, that's also a little taking away his free will, but not in terms of changing who he was, only in terms of what he would say. Okay? Comments or questions here?
Definitely more challenging than I thought it would be on Thursday evening.
You're not talking about just in your own house, Nick.
Oh yeah, I live with 3 women. I'm automatically the dumbest person in the room. So, I do the best I can.
I don't really believe that, but okay.
No, I'm just joking. No, but really, this is really much more sophisticated than I thought it would be. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Someone else? All right, let's take a look at the next text. Right? Also from the Talmud, quotes a verse from Proverbs. Wounds by a loved one are long-lasting. The kisses of an enemy are profuse. The curse uttered by Achila the Shiloni was better than the blessing given to them by the wicked Balaam, right? Achia, character in the book of Kings, prophet, cursed them by comparing them to a reed. The reed rises in water, drives young shoots, and has many roots, and stands firm in its place. Not so Balaam, who blessed them by comparing them to a cedar which does not grow in water, does not drive young shoots, and has few roots. Hence, when a strong southern wind blows, it uproots and overturns it. So what is this saying?
It says that God tried to make him bless us, but he gave us a poor blessing.
So even though God made him bless the Jewish people, it's not a full-hearted blessing. Right? It's the kisses of an enemy. And we all know how the kisses of an enemy. What did we? Where did we see that? Julius Caesar.
Et tu, Brute?
Yeah. Yeah. So here, God does not change Balaam. God does not even put specific words in his mouth, only that you can only bless them. So Balaam blesses them with a weak blessing. Yeah.
Matovu sounds pretty good to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are parts of it that are very eloquent and that seem very nice. So that would be an argument against this interpretation, right? Unless you can find a way to take even those eloquent blessings and understand them as being somehow watered down. So, I don't know about this one. I'm not sold on it completely. But that, clearly somebody in the Talmud thought it was reasonable. Other comments or questions here?
I just have a real basic one.
Please.
The last line of this from the Talmud, the Ta'anit. Not so Balaam, who blessed them by comparing them to a cedar. Well, cedars are always a metaphor for strength, and the cedars of Lebanon are these powerful things.
Well, strength is relative. And what this text seems to be saying is that it's only strong in certain situations. And in that situation, it's very weak.
It's still a stretch.
Well, I'm not arguing with you, Ann.
I know.
I just don't want you to feel that whoever put this in the Talmud didn't have grounds for it.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what you're saying, Rabbi, is that depending on the context of using the cedar as a symbol, it can be. This is not, people who read this at the time would have understood that cedars can be weak. They can fall over very easily.
Yeah. Right?
That's fine. I don't think about it that way. So the metaphor just didn't make any sense to me at all. So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe at the time there was a saying that had to do with that. And so it was commonly known. And when the rabbi wrote this down, he figured everybody would know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I would say even so that Daniel is right in that even in that time, most people probably associated the cedar with strength. I mean, they were, that's how they're described in the Bible.
So what I was trying to think, but I didn't go anywhere with the thought, that somehow he's being sarcastic or facetious. In other words, he's saying the opposite of what he really means.
Who?
Whoever wrote this passage that we're reading, it's just
In the Talmud? Doubtful. Usually that kind of thing in the Talmud, they would give you notice that was coming.
Question.
Yes, Ann.
I have a vague notion I've heard somewhere, whether in the Bible or I don't know, remember where, that reeds have been praised before for their ability to bend and not break. So that would be a basis for him to say that.
Yeah, still, there's a basis for it, but I'm far from convinced.
Well, it's still a stretch.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the next text. Nachmanides, Ramban. All right. The Spirit of God came upon him. What does it mean? This is the same experience that a real prophet has. Meaning, when it says the Spirit of God came upon him, you should take that seriously. That's what happens to prophets. Remember what Moses told Joshua, used the same phrase. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord put his Spirit upon them. And Isaiah said that the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. And Balaam calls himself him who hears God's speech, for he has become a prophet. So, good, bad, or indifferent, right now, in that moment, Balaam is a prophet.
This one
And for Nachmanides, that's what you need to pay attention to.
This one makes a lot more sense.
You like that, Daniel?
Yes, I like this one.
I do too.
All right. Well, I'm glad you two agree on something. That's good.
We always agree.
Well, maybe always, sometimes. Anyone else have a comment here? All right, then, let's go to the Or HaChaim. Okay. He says, it is not.
Tell us what that is before Or
Or HaChaim is a commentary called Chaim because the first name of the author is Chaim. Okay? Chaim ben Attar, Morocco, 17th century. And he says, it is not him, Balaam, upon whom God's spirit fell. In other words, you're reading the verse wrong. When it says God's spirit fell upon him, it refers to Israel. The Torah had to write Balaam's name once more, along with the word Vayisa. He raised his eyes. He invoked the prophetic powers with which he had been equipped in order to see what ordinary folk could not see. And it mentions his name to make clear that what Balaam did here, he did in his capacity as a prophet, designated by God to the Gentile nations. He succeeded in seeing the Israelites as a result of invoking these powers with which God had equipped him. Okay? Meaning, he sees that God's spirit is upon Israel. So,
Nice.
you like that?
It's clever.
Because it says the Spirit of God came upon him, but the him could also be Israel.
Seems kind of thin.
It's not
Okay,
grammatically
well,
correct.
that's, you are permitted to critique it.
Yeah, sure.
The great thing about this class, you can take great sages and watch them contradict each other, and you get to pick and choose which ones you think make sense.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So that's the Orach Chaim. Just, a few other tidbits based on a later verse here, okay? Where it says, word of him who hears God's speech, who beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate but with eyes unveiled. All right, this is Balaam now giving this blessing to the Israelites, but he seems to be describing himself. This is the word of him who hears God's speech, beholds visions from the Almighty.
That gives support to Or HaHaim.
Yeah, could be. Right? So again, what back to Ramban, Nachmanides says that Balaam has now become one who sees through a clear glass, like the original prophets. That, by the way, the term in Hebrew is interesting. Is it's aspaklaria, which is sometimes translated as prism, P-R-I-S-M, not prison, prism, right? Like a kaleidoscope, right? But sometimes a prism doesn't give you a clear view of something, right? You look through a kaleidoscope, may or may not give you a clear picture. But says that Moses, as opposed to all the prophets, saw through a clear aspaklaria. All right? So, and Ramban claims that the patriarchs also were, ones who saw God through this clear aspaklaria. Right? So here it says Balaam has become like the original prophets, that I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai. And in our verse, in this verse, God and Almighty are the words El and Shaddai. Or, says Nachmanides, perhaps he is one level below them, since visions from the Almighty are not the same as the Almighty himself, or perhaps even two levels below, since it says he envisioned visions from the Almighty. So like Seeing exactly what God sees, that's the Almighty. Visions from the Almighty, that's 1 degree removed. Envisioning visions from the Almighty is 2 degrees removed. Thus, Ramban.
You almost answered my question right there. I'll just ask it. What does he mean by levels? Is that a mystic reference, a Kabbalah reference?
Sort of. Now, it is interesting. Nachmanides,
It's
he
not.
shades a lot of his mystical inclinations in his commentary on the Torah. But yeah, he was a Kabbalist. And so he certainly saw different levels of worlds as existing, emanating from above and also with response from below.
Okay, good. So these levels 2 and 3, I think he's referring to 2 and 3. Do they have characteristics in a mystic kind of way? In other words, are we supposed to know what those levels mean?
Well, it just sort of depends on which Kabbalist you ask, and I don't know where Nachmanides comes down upon it. But Nachmanides did basically subscribe to the idea that prophecy is, in the lower sfirot of Hod and Netzach, right? So if you know it, if you remember what we talked about in that class about the 10 sfirot, Netzach and Hod are like number 7 and number 8. So you have to, earn your way up there, but it's not like getting up to the throne room.
Well, what are 2 and 3 then?
Well, this is, so it depends on how you interpret level. He's probably not interpreting it just as like 2 or 3 sfirot.
Okay,
Right?
that was my question. Okay.
Also, Nachmanides in the next 3 pages in the book, it spends the next 3 comparing Balaam to Moses, trying to contrast the prophecies of each. So there was obviously trying to show a difference between the 2.
This was better.
So, yeah, so even the idea of comparing Balaam to Moses sounds pretty radical, but if you accept the idea that he sees through a clear glass, well, the only other person of whom that is said is Moses. Okay, let's move to the next one. What did Balaam see? He saw that God's will could not be influenced by sorcery. The thoughts that he had uttered previously now became his own thoughts. He turned to the wilderness, waiting to act as a vehicle for God's will. Right? Notice, what is it that he sees when the veil is lifted off his eyes? And now he gets a clear vision. He understands that all this magical gobbledygook is just that, right? And has no real power, right? And so the thoughts that he had already uttered, the thoughts that God had placed into his mouth, now became his own thoughts.
Is that the same as Samuel Raphael Hirsch?
Yeah, that's Samson Raphael Hirsch. Right.
And he lived into our century. I mean, and not in the 20th.
No, he died in the 1880s, I believe.
Oh.
So, at any rate, Hirsch is a very rationalistic commentary, but here it is almost as if, it's not quite saying, but almost as if God has changed him.
Well, he's opened his eyes. That
Yeah.
count as a change?
Yeah.
Seems to me that, never mind.
Let's hear it.
Oh, come on.
Let's hear it.
I
No,
won't be
no.
able to sleep
It's
now.
changed.
Don't.
It's like the Balaam at the beginning and the end are different people.
Next. All right. This is from Menachem HaKohen. When does a person begin to see the hand of God? It's in the verse. When he is prostrate, when he is humbled. That's when his eyes are open and he pays attention and observes. And as Pirkei Avot says, there is an eye that sees and an ear that hears. Right? So you have a lot of different possibilities here, right? Does Balaam actually bless God only against his will? Or does he acquire some appreciation for the Israelites?
Well,
It's not very often that an anti-Semite changes his colors,
it does happen.
but it does happen.
But maybe he hasn't changed his colors. Maybe he just realizes that this particular way of trying to oppose Hashem is not going to work. Maybe there's another way.
Maybe. You like to give him a lot of credit, I guess, but
Well, he was smart. Just because he was wicked doesn't mean he wasn't smart.
Just
Yeah.
because he's on the other side, just because he perceives Israel as an enemy, doesn't make him an anti-Semite either. They're just enemies.
well,
He's getting paid too.
yeah, but the fact that he's getting paid means that, maybe he has a predilection in this direction.
Like Jimmy Carter.
Wow, that was really good. A predilection. What did you say? I can't even say it.
It means he has tendencies in that direction.
Spell that.
I don't really
spell
know
that
what
for
it
me,
means, Nick.
so I can say that to my kids one time. I don't care. I don't know what it means either. It just sounds really cool. Like, what did you say? Ask.
You have a
Claire?
predilection to be naughty tonight,
Well, yeah, I won't drink next Thursday.
Yeah,
Okay.
Nick, write that down on the side of the vodka bottle so you can remember it.
I could barely spell my name. That's probably not a good predilection to infection.
Yeah.
I don't
I'm
know.
not sure about the
Whatever.
vowels.
All right. I should not have done that. No,
Yes,
never
you should.
No, it's
All
my
right,
fault.
but
It's not your fault.
Before we finish here, I do have to bring up this other thing that Anne has alluded to a couple of times, which is that in Numbers chapter 31, Balaam is blamed for the immorality which takes place at the end of our reading. Right? So that may sway some of you in one direction or another, because either he was backsliding or he was wicked all along and he only did what God forced him to do.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go read it. I'll read it in the Tanakh and then.
Yeah.
You know,
about it.
every year when we get to this Parsha, it confuses me, and I have to start all over again. I can't even, when I first start reading it, remember the difference between Balak and Balaam.
And the names sound so much alike. It's
Yeah, why do
confusing.
they?
All right. So here's the difference. Balak is the one with the money. Balaam is the one who wants it.
I'll try to see if that helps, Rabbi,
Okay.
because I'm tired of starting from scratch trying to figure this one out every year.
Well,
So Balak
wish
is
you good
lucky.
luck
42
next
years in a row, and I still don't understand this Parsha.
If this is the biggest problem you have, you're doing great.
I know.
Much better than I am, obviously, from tonight's commentary.
You're in a great mood tonight, Dick.
Well, it's that
Well, you
bottle
know.
that did it,
Stolichnaya is like very inspirational.
I guess.
Yes, sir.
I've got to ask, do you freeze it?
Look,
Why
I
don't
literally
you
drink it
guys
2 or 3 times a
take
year.
that conversation offline, okay?
Well, I'm illegal. I'm almost 50.
I am closing this meeting.
Okay, Rabbi, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Hey,
Rabbi.
all.
Very
Glad
interesting.
you all came.
Thank you, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Come again, everybody.
All right. Good night.